from Tavshin Aleph, B'siyata D'Shmaya, Shabbos Parshas Pinchas, Yudal Tammuz Tavshin Dal. Says Tabet Bnei Yisrael V'amart Aleihem, command the Bnei Yisrael and say to them, as Karboni Lachmi L'Yishai, my carbon, my bread for my fire. V'amart Aleihem, you shall say to them, this is the fire offering that you shall offer to Hashem. It's known the question in the Mamorim of Arabim, starting off with the Maimer from Likutei Torah and continuing in other Mamorim of the Alter Rebbe that they in the Marmakoimus with Tziyunim, where they have the note to Likutei Torah, they make a note of the back of the Torah. It makes a note which Mamorim these are of the Alter Rebbe, and also there's Mamorim of the Mittler Rebbe on this topic, and there's Mamorim of the Tzemach Tzedek, and more. Why does it say over here twice, Ve'amart, and you shall say, Savas Bnei Yisrael V'amart Aleihem, and then V'amart Aleihem, it already says, you shall say. That's one question. Another question that I was going to ask is why Karbonis are only in the times of the Beis HaMikdash, the literal Karbonis. Also, when you understand in Yadua Masham Razal, it's known what the Chazal say, Tfilos Mekayim Tmidim Tiknun, that are davening, Shachris in the morning, Mincha in the afternoon, was established to correspond to the Karban Tamid. The Tamid of the morning is Shachris, and the Tamid of the afternoon, that's Mincha. Other places it doesn't say specifically Karban Tamid, but Tefillah was established in regards and as corresponding to all the Karbanos. It takes the place of all the Karbanos, regardless of the fact that Tefillah is something that's present now. And it was established corresponding to the Karbanos or corresponding to the Tmidim. Still in all, the matter doesn't leave its simple sense. The simple idea of karbonis needs to be in the simple meaning of karbonis. It has to be karbonis in the literal sense, where we're literally bringing a carbon to Hashem by bringing an animal on the Mizbeach, in the Beis HaMikdash, or in the Mishkan. So therefore, the Rebbe asks, why is the idea of karbonis in the literal sense, in the simple sense, only in the times of the Beis HaMikdash? After the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, there doesn't exist the idea of karbonis in the simple sense, begashmis. Very interesting that specifically the Rebbe discusses this now. Now we're holding a middle of 3 weeks. We are discussing and we are focusing both on what we lost in the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash and also the fact what we gain from the Beis HaMikdash and what we gain when the Beis HaMikdash will be rebuilt. So therefore, it's an interesting thing that at this time of year, this is the focal point and this is the discussion that's in the Rebbe's Maimer here. So then the Rebbe goes on to say another question. In addition to this, Befrat, and especially this becomes even more difficult. Gam ata also now yeshna inyan karbonos beruchnis betfilah cholu. Nowadays there is the spiritual aspect of karbonos. Like we said before, there's tefillah, there's davening. From this is indicated that the idea of karbonos is applicable also these days. So therefore, if we see that in concept, in spiritual aspect, the karbonos are applicable nowadays as well. So why is it that the practical carbon, the literal meaning of carbon, is not something that's applicable these days? Additional to this, this idea that we're saying that the karbonis is something that exists, that the spiritual component of karbonis is to be found nowadays. So the Rebbe says it's not a chiddush of nowadays. It's not that these days we have this chiddush of having karbonis in the spiritual. So let's say like this: it's a trade-off. In the times of Beis Hamikdash, there was the physical carbon, and nowadays we have something new. We have the spiritual aspect of karbonis. So the Rebbe says it's not correct. The spiritual component of karbonis was there in the times of the Beis Hamikdash alongside the physical karbonis. Let's see it inside. Also in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, there was the spiritual intention of the karbonis. Rashi, like it's brought down in Rashi's explanation, that at the times of the Beis Hamikdash, then the Kohanim and the Levim and the Israelim were all there involved. And what was the Yisrael's thing? They stood. Yisrael b'mamod. The Kohanim did their part of the Avodah. The Levim had their auxiliary participation in the Beis Hamikdash. What was the Yisrael's function? They stood. What was the idea of standing? So they were reciting different psukim and so on. And they were, by them, the Avodah was a spiritual Avodah. The Masha Yisrael B'Mamod Mareza Kavan Ruchni is that the Yidden standing, what's called the Mamodas, that the representative of the Israelim used to be over there in the Beis Hamikdash, like it's brought down, that they used to have mishmaris, they used to have like turns and cycles when different groups of Israelim, representative of the whole Klal Yisrael, used to come to the Beis Hamikdash to stand over the Karbanos. So that's the spiritual intention, but the Kavanah Ruchni is lo'haya rak b'Yisrael. Since they did not offer Karbanos on their own, so obviously all they were doing was a spiritual thing. Elagam b'kehanim, also the kehanim, also involved a spiritual component, even though they were preoccupied with the physicality of the carbon. So one might think that since they were preoccupied with the physicality of the carbon, that was their avodah. So maybe the Kohanim was about the physical aspect of the carbon, and the Israelim were about the spiritual aspect of the carbon. So we know it's not that case. There's a losh in the Zohar, Kohanim b'chashoy berusa deliba. They were silent. They were quiet, not like the Levim that they would have the shira and the zimra. They would play musical instruments and they would say songs. That's obviously, in other Amarim, he points out that the Levim's avodah was obviously spiritual, this idea of singing songs and so on. That's kol bale ashir yotzim b'shir and nefnasim b'shir, like we had 2 Amarim ago, that shows on the expiration of the soul yearning to be close to Hashem and so on. So that was a spiritual thing. But even the Kehanim that were involved in the physical aspect of the bringing of the Karbanos, by them as well, it was a point, it was an idea of spirituality as well. So therefore, since it's like we said before, it wasn't a trade-off. It wasn't that in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, the Karbanos were totally physical. Now we exchange that the Karbanos are now spiritual. No, in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, there was the physical component and there was the spiritual component. And now all we're left with is a spiritual component. The Rebbe asked him, Cain, Yuksha b'Yosef becomes even more difficult. Madua inyan karbonos v'pashtas v'yidafka b'zman habayis. Why was the idea of the simple meaning of the karbonos specifically? Why was that in the times of the Beis Hamikdash? Why did we not have? Why can we not have the literal physical karbonos these days as well? It's explained concerning this in the Mamor. Like we said before, there's multiple Amarim that talk about this topic. Where it says over here twice the words "V'amarta," which is the original question in the Maimer. It corresponds to the 2 components that we just now referred back to in the Karbanos. V'amarta, Aleph, the first time that says V'amarta, That refers to the service of the karbonos in thought and speech, meaning both of those, thought and speech, indicate ruchnius, the spiritual component of karbonos. And the second time when it says in our parsha the words "Vamarta," the intention is the idea of the karbonos in the physical action. Okay, the Pirish Rashi ala Pasuk Beis, like Rashi explains on the second pasuk, it says over there, "Va'amart Elohem," you shall say to them. Who is the them that it's referring to in the second pasuk? LeBezdin. You should tell Bezdin to bring these karbonos. So the question is, why Bezdin? Isn't it the whole Klal Yisrael? Though the karbonos came from the money that was collected from all the Yidden, from the half a shekel, that's where all the communal karbonos were brought from, starting from the tamid. The carbon tamid was collected from was paid for from the machzah shekel, and all the other public karbonos like the musafim of Rish Chodesh and Yom Tov and so on and so forth. All of this was our money, Klal Yisrael's money. So why does it say "Ve'amarta lohem"? You shall say to them, to Bezdin. So he says, after the money was collected, it stopped being my matzah shekel, your matzah shekel. Now it was placed in that chamber in the Beis HaMikdash where they had all the matzah shekel collected. And now it took on a new term. Now instead of private funds, now this became public funds. And then afterwards, the actual offering of the karbonos, meaning the administering of the funds, the allocation of the funds, that was done by the directive of Bezdin, like it's brought down concerning the using the funds in different manners. So the Gemara says that the Bezdin's mind had preconditioned and made conditions about how and in what type of way these funds could be used. So we see it was given over to the hands of Bezdin as, not as a private individual, but b'shlichus kol hatzibur kulo, as representing the entire community. Who would represent the entire community with administering the funds of the karbonos? That was Bezdin. It says, so therefore, this we're talking about here is a physical, actual bringing of the karbonos that had to be given over the physical people that would administer it. So therefore, according to this, it becomes even more difficult. Now the above mentioned question, why was this idea of the physical carbon at the time of the Beis HaMikdash? So in other words, this whole lengthy discussion is really to bring out that the second time that it says "Ve'amarta," it's talking about the actual carbon. And how do we know so? Because Rashi says you're giving it to Bezdin. We're not talking about if it's something having to do in thought and speech. That's not something that's administered by Bezdin. So we're talking about administered by Bezdin. We're talking about actual money, physical money that's used to be able to purchase and to be able to acquire the karbonos and to administer it and so on. The question is, if the second Vamarta is going specifically on physical, so why in the times of Golus do we not have the opportunity to fulfill the second time that it says Ve'amart? So the Rebbe goes on even more so. It's not really a chiddush when we say that in karbonos there is the thought and speech, even in the times of the Beis HaMikdash, because we find this in all mitzvahs. It says the hine inyan zem the machshava dibur ha'maisa yesh bechol mitzvahs k'noida. This idea of thought, speech, and deed is to be found in all the mitzvahs as it's known. Kavanas ha-mitzvahs, bechinas machshava. The intention of a mitzvah, when I perform a mitzvah, and I do it with the appropriate intention, and I have kavanah, or just even the kavanah that I'm thinking that I'm doing it for Hashem, and I'm the kavanah l'shma, that's the level of thought that's to be found in every mitzvah. Birchas ha-mitzvahs, the bracha that we make on the mitzvahs, is bechinas ha-dibur. That's the level of speech, the speech component of every mitzvah. Maisa ha-mitzvahs is bechinas maisa, and actually the action of the mitzvahs is the level of action. So every mitzvah has the three components of machshava, dibur, and maisa. It's not unique to karbanos. I feel the mitzvahs hatluyos machshava, dibur, also those mitzvahs that are seemingly dependent on thought and speech. Let's say the idea of avodah shavalev, the idea of achdus haboyre, the idea of the study of Torah, whichever. These are mitzvahs that are limited to thought and speech. So how do you say all mitzvahs have thought, speech, and deed if they're only performed in thought and speech? So he says, Gam yesh behem machshava dibur ma'isa. Also in those mitzvahs that are limited to thought and speech, there's also thought, speech, and deed. Moving on mavur begeras hakodesh, like it's understood from what's explained in the end of Tanya in Geras hakodesh. Shebachol davar v'davar yesh b'machshava dibur ma'isa. In each one of these, there is thought, speech, and deed. Shegam b'machshava yesh machshava sheb'machshava v'dibur sheb'machshava u'ma'isa sheb'machshava. Even in thought itself, there is thought of thought, there is speech of thought, and there's action of thought. For example, it's brought down in Chassidus that when a person is thinking an idea, before they even put it into language, into words in their mind, so that's machshava shemachshava. When they're ready, putting it into words in their mind, so that's already dibur shemachshava. When they can actually picture the words in their mind. For example, they're reading with their eyes words that are printed on a paper, words that are in Sefer Torah. So then that's called the Ma'aseh of Machshav. And just like there's all three things in thought, similar to that in speech, there's thought part of speech, which is, in other words, the part of speech that has to do with thinking what I'm saying, that I have to think what I'm about to say, or during my speaking, I'm thinking. Then there's v'dibur shebedibur, that's the actual speech of the speech. And then there's ma'aseh shebedibur. Ma'aseh shebedibur is the actual action of formulating the words, not just I'm saying it, but consciously, I believe, formulating the words. Top of the next page, 2199. So to an action that there is machshava dibur ma'aseh in action, there's the thought behind the action, there's the speech that leads up to the action, and then there's the act itself. So therefore, being that in each one of these three, there's all other three. So even if a person is fulfilling a mitzvah that is only a mitzvah of thought, that has no action component, even in that, there's still the action of the machshava. And even someone that fulfills a mitzvah that only a dibur mitzvah, let's say, benching or reading Krishma, which is only a dibur mitzvah, there's the machshava component of it, and there's the action component of it. So therefore, since all mitzvahs throughout all the generations have all components, have thought, speech, and deed. But the Rebbe asked the question of Im Kain, therefore, how is the mitzvah of karbanos different? Why and in what way was the mitzvah of karbanos different? When it comes to other mitzvahs, there's also action in these days. That even other mitzvahs, we have it in action. As opposed to the mitzvah of karbanos. These days, there's only the speech and the thought aspect of karbanos. As we said, with davening, we come to replace the idea of karbanos. But below b'maisa, there isn't the action component of karbanos. That's again really repeating the same question previously, but with further elaboration. Any questions before we go on?
Is this similar to the idea like on this year on Tisha B'Av? Since it's on Shabbos, we have the spiritual part of it, but not the physical part on Shabbos itself? Because we're not fasting.
It's not about physical versus spiritual. The Rebbe looks at it as the true nature of the fast, which is a yom ratzon without the outer shell of the negativity connected with it. But I think it's a little bit of a different topic. I don't think we want to mix topics over here now. We can start, putting together things. Okay, second paragraph, second page in the printout. But the idea behind this is concerning the karbanos. It says it's a pleasing scent for Hashem. So the Chazal have trouble with it. How can you say by Hashem the idea of sense, smell, so on? So the Chazal explained that the words reach nichayach indicate nachas ruach lefanai, a pleasant spirit is before me. In other words, it was something pleasing before me. That I said, and my will was fulfilled. So that is the pleasant scent, quote unquote, before Hashem, that we caused by Hashem, a pleasantness, kaviyachol, that it's pleasing to Him because we fulfilled His will. The effect of the karbanos reach a level of Hashem's nachas ruach. Bechinas hatainug, the level of delight, that the level of delight is beyond all powers of above, metaphorically speaking. In other words, just like by a person we know, there's all different types of soul powers. There's emotions, there's intellect, there's thought, speech, and deed, there's will. But on top of everything, there's the level of delight, because the delight motivates his will, which indicates what he should think about and what types of emotions will come out from that, and thought, speech, and deed. So delight is the highest of all these things by a human being. In a similar vein, kaviyachol, by Hashem, the level of delight preceded everything. That is the reason for the whole creation and so on, that He wanted to delight in the world and so on. And so on. So the karbanos, the Chazal tell us, that the level of the karbanos, the effect of the karbanos reaches all the way in the level of Hashem's delight. The Rebbe goes on to be medayik in the words. It says nachas, doesn't just say nachas ruach shamarti v'nasar etzayni, but the term that's used is lefanai. Simply means lefanai, before me. But we always know Chassidus likes to take the lefanai and bring it to a deeper meaning. So lefanai means in me, in my pnimius. It's a nachas ruach, before me, meaning into me, internally, the internal level, the inner type of delight, because in delight there's all different types of levels, just like in Seder Shtalshlus, in almost every level, there's all different types of levels that can be divided. And delight, there's an external type of delight that has to do with external things, and then there's delight that a person has from things that are deep-seated to him, from his children, let's say, from his own self. These are deep aspects of delight. So the karbanos is nachas ruach lefanai. It's the level that taps into the Eibishter's delight that's in the most deepest place. And through what is caused and comes about, the nachas ruach before him, Amru, concerning this, they said, that I said and my will was fulfilled. What does that mean? The emphasis over here is on the word nasa. Specifically, what causes, what evokes, what taps into the Eibishter's level of delight, that's the level of action. What is affected and results through this, that it becomes fulfilled. His will, or even more so, it taps in the will and the light are really related to each other. They're two sides from one coin. So his will being fulfilled and his tainug and his delight being fulfilled are really connected to each other. And the delight comes about specifically through my will being done. Specifically through action, like he emphasized the word nasir. When my will is done, when there's the level of asiya, that's action, not thought, not speech. That's what reaches the level of the innermost delight. How come? The higher something is, the lower it descends. And therefore, it's not just that the higher something is, the lower it descends, but the reverse also works. The connection of the higher and the lower works in reverse as well. And the highest most level of the light, the innermost level of the light, is something that's drawn down and revealed through that which is the lowest, through the level of action. So, in truth, action is to be found in all the mitzvahs, and even the delight is to be found in all the mitzvahs. This idea that we tap into Hashem's delight and the action, which is the lowest, has a source in the highest, is really occurs in all the mitzvahs that are done down here with physical matters. Through that, we are making a home for the Eibishter down here below. And because we're making a home for the Eibishter down here below, therefore, we reach up very, very high. We're able to draw down Hashem's delight and fulfill his nakas ruach. In such a low place that there's nothing lower than it. That down here below, we draw down the level of nakas ruach before me. I'm still in all af became. Yesh Maila Ba'avoides HaKarbonis Shebezman Habayis or Beis HaMikdash Dafir. There's specifically an advantage in the avoid of Karbonis over all the other mitzvahs that are done here in the physical and action that took place specifically in the times of the Beis HaMikdash and in the Beis HaMikdash itself. It's not just the time of the Beis HaMikdash. There's a lot of mitzvahs that were only practiced in the time of the Beis HaMikdash, but they're not limited to the place of the Beis HaMikdash. Here we're talking about both components. It had to be only the time of the Beis HaMikdash and specifically in the specific area, in the specific place of the Beis HaMikdash. Bishum, Tatus HaKavana Basiyas Adir Lo Yizbader, he lo yidakshi yumshach hanakas ruach, because the ultimate purpose in making a home for the Eibishter is not just that the delight should come down. Another idea behind this is that the home should be in a revealed way. Should be recognized in a revealed way. Through my will being fulfilled in action, the light becomes something that is that is affecting my delight. In other words, through the action, it's affecting my delight. In other words, Dira B'Tachtoinim does not just mean a home down here below that Hashem is present and we don't see his presence. Dira B'Tachtoinim is about that it should be recognized Hashem's presence. Where, in which mitzvah do we have that recognition? Specifically, we have it in the mitzvah of Karbonis, and that could only take place in the Beis HaMikdash, as we will speak about tomorrow.